I had been the family's scapegoat for years, but when they mocked me for my imperfect marriage, I delivered a bombshell gift at my sister's anniversary. It turned the tables on all of them. Join me to unravel how I break free from family indifference. I had barely stepped into the lavish ballroom for Sarah's anniversary party when I could feel it. The weight of their expectations. Their eyes gawked on me like I was some sort of failure. The moment I walked in, I knew this wasn't just a celebration. It was another round in their ongoing game of comparing me to Sarah. Sarah, of course, was radiant, standing beside Mark, her picture-perfect husband, their children running around with their perfect smiles. They looked like they had it all, while I was the one whose marriage was barely hanging by a thread. It wasn't even subtle. I could hear my mother's voice float through the air. "Look at Sarah," she said, turning to me with a glint in her eye. "She's got the perfect marriage, the perfect family, a real role model. You should take a note, Claire. Stability is key." She always did this, pitched me against Sarah. But this time I wasn't ready for how it would feel. The words landed in my chest with a thud. I gave Sarah a quick glance. There she was, her hands delicately folded, smiling at Mark, her golden child act in full display. But what made it worse? Sarah wasn't just sitting back and letting the comparisons slide. No, she was playing right along. She shot me a glance across the room, her expression smug, like she was enjoying the way I was being belittled. It wasn't enough to just be the perfect daughter. She had to make sure I knew it too. Sarah had always been the one who had it together, the one who never made mistakes, the one who followed all the rules. But what about me? I had tried to follow the rules too, but every time I did, it felt like the world was set up for me to fail. Mark laughed at something Sarah said, and my mother leaned in, as if drawing me into her web. "Sarah's marriage is rock solid," she continued, almost proudly. "Such a model of maturity and wisdom, a real inspiration." Maturity? Wisdom? My heart began to pound. Was I not mature or wise? Was my failing marriage a reflection of everything that was wrong with me? I fought back the tears, forcing myself to smile, but the knot in my stomach twisted tighter. And then, as if on cue, my father chimed in. "You know, Sarah's really taken charge of her life. Look at the stability she's built. I admire her. She's got a vision for her family. You could really learn a lot from her, Claire." My father, the one person I always thought would have my back. But now, he was telling me that I couldn't measure up to Sarah. The sting of the comparison wasn't just in the words. They were cutting me open. I felt my face flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. Why didn't anyone see what I was trying to do? Why didn't anyone acknowledge the effort I put in, the way I fought for my marriage, even when it felt like everything was crumbling? I looked at Sarah again, and this time she didn't just look smug, she looked triumphant. As if this was all part of the plan, as if she were getting some twisted satisfaction from watching me squirm. I wanted to scream, to say, "I'm doing my best. I'm not a failure just because my marriage is struggling right now." But instead, I clenched my fists and nodded, taking deep breaths to keep my composure. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. But Sarah's eyes followed me as I walked away, her gaze sharp, almost like she was enjoying this. She wasn't just passive in this comparison, she was an active participant. I thought back to the way she'd brushed off my struggles when I confided in her, the way she'd laughed at my worries like they were some petty thing. And all this time, I had believed that Sarah, of all people, would understand, but she was just as much a part of the problem as my parents. By the time dessert was served, I could barely focus on the conversations around me. The weight of my mother's constant comparisons, the praise for Sarah, the looks exchanged between my parents and her, felt like an unbearable load. And then, as I sat there, forcing a smile and pretending everything was okay, it hit me. I wasn't just the second choice. I wasn't just the other daughter. I had been systematically pushed aside in favor of Sarah, the golden child. My parents were blind to the fact that they were slowly suffocating me with their expectations. They didn't care about my marriage, my struggles, or my dreams. They only cared about who could meet their standards of perfection. I felt the anger slowly rising inside me. Enough is enough. I was done being the failure in their eyes. I was done living in Sarah's shadow, done letting them believe she was the better daughter. But what would I do with all of this? I couldn't just sit back and take it anymore. I had to show them. I had to show everyone what I was capable of, and that started with taking control of my life, no matter what Sarah or my parents thought. The weight of the evening's mockery lingered like a dark cloud, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I could feel it pressing down on me. Every word my mother spoke, every compliment she showered on Sarah and her so-called perfect marriage, seemed to chip away at what little confidence I had left. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger simmering beneath the surface. But I swallowed it all. I had to remain composed. I had to stay calm. But deep inside, a fire was growing. A fire fueled by years of feeling inferior, years of watching Sarah take all the attention and praise while I was pushed to the sidelines. I had never been the golden child. I had never been the one everyone looked up to, the one everyone was proud of. And tonight, I felt that more than ever. As my parents continued to dote on Sarah, I quietly excused myself from the conversation. I knew what I had to do. The first step in my plan was simple but deadly. A gift. But not just any gift. I wanted to give Sarah and her perfect little family something that would destroy the facade she'd so carefully built. I'd been working on this for weeks, gathering information, piecing together the puzzle of Sarah's husband, Daniel. It wasn't difficult. I had seen the cracks in their perfect marriage long before I started to dig. I knew the truth. Daniel, the charming, ever-smiling man who always played the role of the doting husband at family gatherings, had been hiding a dark secret. For years, he had been living a double life. I knew about the affairs, the women, the families, and I knew he was doing it all behind Sarah's back. I wasn't some bitter, jealous sister trying to tear down her happy life. No, this wasn't about jealousy anymore. This was about fairness. About standing up for myself in the face of years of ridicule. And what better way to expose their perfect life than to unveil the truth with a simple gift? The plan was set in motion. I reached out to a trusted contact who helped me get the evidence I needed. It wasn't just rumors. It was cold, hard proof. Photos, messages, documents, all neatly wrapped in a gift box. I could almost hear the gasps of shock and disbelief as the truth about Sarah's perfect husband came to light. I felt a strange sense of empowerment as I arranged everything. This wasn't just any gift. It was the kind of gift that would change everything. It was the kind of gift that would make Sarah see what I had known all along, that her perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. As the night wore on, I kept my cool, never letting on to my family that I was about to do the unthinkable. I stood there, smiling, offering small talk, pretending that everything was fine, all while knowing what I was about to do. The tension inside me was unbearable, but I couldn't let them see it. The gift arrived. I took it in my hands, feeling the weight of it, both physically and emotionally. It was time. Time to turn the tables, to show everyone that I wasn't the failed sister anymore. I was the one with the power now. My heart raced as I approached Sarah and Daniel. They were laughing, exchanging pleasantries with my parents, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. I smiled at them, my expression calm and collected, though inside I was trembling with anticipation. This was the moment that would change everything. I handed Sarah the gift, watching her face light up as she took it from me. I could see the excitement in her eyes, the naive joy of someone who thought they were about to receive a thoughtful gesture, even after all the ridicule towards me. But this wasn't a gesture. This was a bombshell. "Happy anniversary," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the fury I had felt earlier. "I thought you might enjoy this." Sarah smiled, oblivious to the chaos she was about to unleash. She tore off the wrapping, completely unaware of the weapon she was unboxing. As she opened the box and saw the contents inside, I saw her expression falter, just for a moment. Her smile wavered, and her eyes widened slightly. "Claire," she started, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. I could see her struggling to maintain composure, but it was too late. The room went silent. I watched as Sarah pulled out the evidence. The photographs and messages, the undeniable truth about her husband's infidelities. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The quiet buzz of conversation in the background suddenly stopped, and everyone turned to look. My parents were frozen. Sarah's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for something to say, but the words wouldn't come. And Daniel, he stood there, his face draining of color, his jaw clenching as he looked between Sarah and the evidence in her hands. I didn't feel victorious in that moment. I didn't feel like I had won. No, what I felt was something deeper. Something more satisfying than any petty revenge. I felt free. Finally, after years of being overshadowed, of being the one always compared to Sarah's perfection, I had reclaimed my place. I had forced them to face the truth, and I had done it without breaking a sweat. Claire had always been the black sheep of the family, but tonight I had shown them who I really was. As I watched Sarah and Daniel squirm, I realized that this wasn't about vengeance. This wasn't about tearing down my sister. This was about reclaiming my power, letting them know life can happen to anybody. As the room grew colder and the whispers started, I knew that this moment would change everything. It wasn't just about exposing my sister's husband. It was about taking control of my own narrative. And for once, I was no longer the failed sister, no longer the overlooked one. I had become the one who held the cards. She froze, her fingers gripping the edges of the first photo, her face slowly draining of color. Her eyes flicked to the next item, an email, before quickly darting back to the first image. My heart didn't race in that moment. It didn't need to. I knew what was coming. I'd orchestrated this. Her silence was deafening, but I could hear the whispers begin to stir among the guests. "What is this? Why is she showing this now?" My parents' proud faces twisted in confusion, their eyes shifting between Sarah and me. Sarah's breath quickened as she struggled to process the images in front of her. There was no denying it. The evidence was clear. One by one, the guests began to glance at the photos being passed around. Images of Sarah's husband, Daniel, caught in compromising situations with other women. Texts revealing not just one affair, but multiple. And there it was, his dark secret laid bare. The life he'd built with Sarah, the perfect husband and father, was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. His betrayal was now out in the open, and it was impossible for anyone to ignore. Sarah's face contorted. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hand shook as she placed the photos back into the box, then quickly attempted to close it, as though that would somehow erase what had been revealed. The room was suddenly filled with gasps. The shockwaves of the revelation rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged looks, whispered to one another, some even turned away, unable to watch the unraveling of a marriage they thought was flawless. And all the while, I stood there, watching calmly as my sister's world collapsed around her. Her perfect life, the one everyone had envied, had been nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The very thing she had flaunted as her triumph, as her proof of success, was now in pieces on the floor, and I could do nothing but watch it unfold. Sarah turned to Daniel, her eyes filled with disbelief. He didn't meet her gaze. He couldn't. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. The facade he had worked so hard to build was cracking, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. I caught my breath as Sarah's eyes flickered between me and the photos. She still hadn't spoken. There was no denial, no attempt to explain. And for a moment, it seemed like the air in the room was thick with the weight of her failure. She was no longer the golden girl, the one everyone looked up to. She was just another woman who had been blindsided by the truth, exposed for her ignorance. My mother's face turned pale as she looked between Sarah and me. Her lips trembled, but no words came. My father, ever the protector, straightened his posture as if attempting to shield Sarah from the fallout. But it was too late for that. He tried to salvage the situation, clumsily offering a few words of comfort to Sarah. But it was clear to everyone in the room that the damage had already been done. As I stood there, I felt the sharp sting of years of being the lesser sister, the one who couldn't keep her marriage together, the one who was always in the shadow of Sarah's perfection. And yet, now, the tables had turned. I had never imagined that one simple action, one perfectly timed moment, could unravel everything Sarah had built. But I had done it, and in that moment, I felt a sense of calm. Not satisfaction, not joy, but calm. I had made my point. I had exposed the truth. My family's gaze shifted from Sarah to me, their expressions shifting from shock to confusion, then to guilt. There was no denying what had happened. They couldn't ignore it any longer. For years they had praised Sarah, ignored my pain, and turned a blind eye to the reality of my marriage. But now, as they looked at me, they couldn't pretend to ignore the strength I had found. They had underestimated me. I had been patient, and now I had the courage and power. I took a deep breath and straightened my back. The silence in the room stretched on, thick with tension. Sarah was still frozen, her face a mixture of shock and betrayal, but I wasn't finished yet. "I think the truth speaks for itself," I said softly, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. My words echoed through the room, leaving a lingering sting that no one could shake off. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. The room was suspended in the shock of the moment, the reality of what had just happened settling in. My parents finally stirred, looking between Sarah and me, but their words caught in their throats. I could see the cracks in their perfect family, the fracture lines they had long ignored. They had built Sarah up as the golden child, and now they had no choice but to face the consequences of their favoritism. Sarah's voice finally broke the silence, though it was barely a whisper. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her eyes still wide with disbelief. But there was no apology in her voice, no remorse, only the bitter realization that her carefully constructed world had come crashing down around her. I stood my ground, unwavering. "You left me no choice than to let you know life can happen to anybody. Don't find comfort in mocking others." And just like that, the party was over. The celebration, that was meant to honor my sister's perfect marriage, had turned into an ugly display of reality. But as the guests began to murmur and scatter, I felt a strange sense of liberation. This wasn't just about exposing Sarah's husband. It was about reclaiming my voice. It was about no longer being the lesser sister. It was about being seen for who I truly was, not just the second option. I left the room, my head held high, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my own power. The truth had set me free. The aftermath of the anniversary party was nothing short of chaotic. The revelation of Sarah's husband's betrayals had sent shockwaves through our family, leaving destruction in its wake. Sarah's once pristine image, meticulously crafted for years, was shattered. Her perfect marriage, her picture-perfect life, crumbled like a house of cards. My parents, too, were caught off guard, their disappointment in their daughter palpable. The image they had so carefully maintained was suddenly ruined, and they had no one to blame but themselves. The evening had ended with Sarah in tears, her world spiraling out of control. The facade was gone. My parents, too, were shaken, perhaps more concerned with their reputation than with what had actually transpired. I could see the confusion in their eyes as they tried to salvage whatever they could from the wreckage of their beloved daughter's perfect life. I had been waiting for this moment. I had been waiting for them to see the truth, but I knew better than to keep my expectations high. It wasn't the truth they were concerned with. It was how to fix the mess that Sarah had created, how to cover up the scandal, how to patch the hole in their image. And through it all, there I was, the scapegoat, the one they had never truly seen. But as much as they scrambled to salvage their family's reputation, I knew something deep inside me had shifted. I couldn't keep pretending like nothing was wrong. I couldn't allow myself to be the fallback plan anymore, the one who always picked up the pieces when things fell apart. The realization hit me as I watched my parents try to console Sarah. They were offering her comfort and support, but their words rang hollow to me. My mother, the one who had mocked me for years, who had always seen me as the lesser daughter, was now pandering to Sarah. And my father, who had praised her marriage endlessly, was now trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. They had ignored me for far too long. It was time for me to make a change. For years, I had consistently sent them money, a monthly allowance that kept them comfortable, without asking for anything in return. I did it because I thought it was my responsibility as their daughter. But after everything that had happened, after the years of emotional manipulation, I realized something. They had never truly cared about me. I had been nothing but a tool to them, a source of money, of support. They never saw me for who I was. They saw me only as a means to their ends. I knew then that I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't keep enabling their selfishness, their need to depend on me. I had been foolish, thinking that my support would make a difference. But all it did was reinforce their belief that they could rely on me forever, without ever considering what I needed. I didn't just stop sending money, I completely cut them off. Cold turkey. No more monthly transfers, no more bailing them out when they needed it. I refused to continue giving my hard-earned money to people who had never truly appreciated me. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had to start prioritizing myself for once. I had spent years putting others first, my parents, my sister, even my broken marriage. But not anymore. The first month after I stopped the transfers was the hardest. The silence from my parents was deafening. They didn't call to check on me, to ask how I was doing. They didn't offer any sympathy for the pain I had been through. Instead, they called to demand answers, to ask why I had stopped. They were angry, confused, but mostly, they were desperate. Sarah, of course, was no better. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. And now, with everything falling apart for her, she turned to me for help. Her voice trembled on the other end of the phone, pleading for my support. She was in a mess of her own making, but now she needed me to clean it up. The same sister who had stolen my life's work, who had betrayed me and mocked me with my marriage, now expected me to come to her rescue. I was done. I had reached my limit. As I listened to Sarah's tearful plea, I felt something inside me snap. I had been the one to hold our family together for so long. I had been the one to constantly offer my support, my resources, my love. But all that did was make me weak. It made me their safety net. No more. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, my heart no longer swayed by her pleas. "But I'm not the one who can fix this. I've spent years fixing your mess. And I can't do it anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had always thought she could count on me, but the truth was, I had been the one carrying the weight all along, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. The guilt that had been gnawing at me for so long, the guilt of not being enough, of always being the disappointment, began to dissolve. I had carried that weight, and now, for the first time, I was free. My life, my future, was no longer tied to the expectations of my parents or the needs of my sister. I had finally realized my worth, and it wasn't in the money I sent them, or in the role I had been playing in their lives. It was in myself. As the weeks passed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I worked hard, poured myself into my own passions, and took steps toward reclaiming my independence. The anger and resentment that had built up over the years began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. I had taken control, and I was no longer at the mercy of my family's demands. The more I focused on my own success, the more I realized how little I needed their approval. I had been seeking their love and validation for years, but now I knew that I didn't need them to define who I was. I was enough on my own. The distance between me and my family grew, but it no longer mattered. I had stopped caring about what they thought of me, and for the first time, I felt truly free. The weight of the last few months had finally lifted. The storm of emotions that had clouded my every move, every decision, was beginning to clear. As I sat in my office, looking out at the skyline, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. It wasn't just that I had exposed Sarah's lies, or even that I had confronted my parents about their manipulation. What I had done was so much deeper than that. I had taken control of my own life. I wasn't defined by their expectations, their approval, or their expectations of me. Sarah had always been the golden child. In her perfect little world, her marriage, her business, everything had appeared perfect. But like all facades, it was bound to fall apart. And when it did, I was there, not to gloat, but to observe. I had already moved past the anger. Watching her crumble felt strangely satisfying, but not for the reasons I'd initially imagined. The satisfaction came from knowing that I was no longer part of her drama. Her failures were no longer mine to carry. The discovery of her husband's infidelity really hit her bad. Her business had crashed spectacularly. What once seemed like a thriving empire, built on borrowed ideas and deceit, was now teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Investors pulled out, clients walked away, and the public who had once seen Sarah as the picture of success now viewed her as a fraud. There was no more mask. The truth was out. But it wasn't the collapse that mattered most to me. It was the way she had treated me. I had spent years watching her get everything, while I was left in the shadows. Now, I stood at the center of my own life, ready to move forward in ways I never thought possible. I had always been the dutiful daughter, the quiet one. But the moment I stopped being their safety net, their emotional pawn, I realized that I didn't need them. I had the power to create my own future, and it started with my new life. I had spent months rebuilding my career, rebranding myself in a way that felt authentic and empowering. With the financial freedom I had fought for, I started a new venture, a business I could call my own, one that reflected my values and my vision. It was risky, but the sense of ownership over my future was worth every challenge. As I worked tirelessly to make my business thrive, I saw my confidence grow. It wasn't just the success that felt empowering, it was the independence that came with it. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I didn't need my family to validate my worth. I was building something for myself. The most gratifying moment came when my first major investor came on board. I had spent months working on a pitch, perfecting my concept, and putting together the best team. When they signed the contract, it wasn't just a financial win. It was a personal victory. It was proof that I could succeed on my own, without anyone's help. I had earned every penny, every ounce of respect. With every step, my sense of independence grew stronger. I was no longer tied to the expectations of my family. I had become the person I had always wanted to be, the person who forged her own path, who made her own rules. And it felt incredible. But there was something even more powerful than the business success. It was the way I felt about myself. For the first time, I saw my own worth. I didn't need validation from my parents, my sister, or anyone else. I knew that I was capable. I knew that I deserved this success. I had worked for it. I had fought for it. As Sarah's life crumbled and the fallout from her actions continued to spiral, I found a new peace. The anger that had fueled me for so long was now replaced with clarity. I had won, but not because I had brought her down. I had won because I had risen above it all. I had found my voice, and with it, my purpose. I could see it all so clearly now. The past no longer had any hold on me. The bitterness that had once consumed me, the jealousy, the desire for revenge, those feelings no longer controlled me. Instead, I focused on what lay ahead. The final act of triumph didn't come from watching Sarah's destruction. It came from seeing how far I had come. From the girl who had been overshadowed, manipulated, and betrayed, to the woman standing at the helm of her own empire. I realized, with a deep sense of satisfaction, that my success wasn't about what I had taken from others. It was about what I had built for myself. I had created a life, a business, and an identity that was my own, and nothing felt more powerful than that. As I sat at my desk, looking at the contracts and numbers that would propel my business to the next level, I realized how much stronger I had become. The pain, the struggle, it was all worth it. I had fought for my independence, my future, and my happiness. I had proven to myself that I could rise above anything life threw my way. My story wasn't about revenge, it was about resilience. It was about the power of choosing yourself, even when it feels like the world is against you. And that, I realized, was the true victory. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe.